Hey guys, bringing you another video today. This is Alpha Chess. Be sure to subscribe and hit the like button to get more informative chess content to help better your gameplay. And with that, let's get right into it. So today's topic is going to be on endgames. And this is a nice game that I played that demonstrates just basic fundamentals that you want to practice in the endgame and how to win those drawish positions, especially in lower elo. So this is a game I played in the 1600s, and let's get right into it. So I have the white pieces, and I start with e4. I'm a Vienna player, so naturally I always start with e4. And he responds with knight c6. We have knight c3, e6, bishop c4, and then he plays this knight to e5 move, attacking my bishop, so naturally I just retreat. This isn't theory by any means, but still I feel like I'm going to get a good position out of this. He plays this developing move, and naturally I think I want to kick his knight out of the center of the board, and he retreats to this g6 square, which is, I think, good for white because I have a nice hold on the center with lots of minor pieces and two strong central pawns. So already from the opening I've got a pretty good position, but he fights back. So this is a developing move. I'm thinking of castling. He passively starts to try and contest my center, castles, and then he develops as well, planning to castle kingside. This is a good move, just saying, what do you want to do? Do you want to move your knight, or are we going to open up the center here? I'm castled, you're not, so opening up the center favors white here. He elects to open the center, and then he plays this move, offering his queen, and this knight is threatening to win my pawn right here because I only have it defended once. But I elect to, I think, from this position, I remember thinking I'm going to try and mess up his castling privileges at the expense of giving up this pawn. So I play bishop to g5, captures, captures right here, and then we captures with check, and then winning back. So a good position for white. It looks like you're hanging a piece, but you're actually not because you have this in-between move. So he just elects to take the pawn, and I mess up his pawn structure, or I mess up his castling rights, because after captures, then I have this move, and you have to capture back or you lose the material. Although he plays this in-between move that I missed that messes up my pawn structure, but because I'm destroying his castling rights, I'm not so worried about him. He's going to have to push this pawn quite a ways, and he's got a knight in front of it before he's going to really be able to take advantage of this semi-open g-file. So, as you can see, he's up a pawn, but I win it back pretty soon. I like these moves right here, putting my rooks on these open files, because now this piece is pinned, and I've got some nasty checks, maybe picking up a piece here in the future. So he develops his light squared bishop. He wants to do the same, but he's 2 moves behind me because of that interchange and opening up the center before he was castled there in the middle. So that's why you never open up the center before you're castled, just as a general tip, because as you can see, the only difference between our positions, aside from this slightly worse pawn structure for white, is black is 2 moves behind white, right? So this is a nice in-between move. Best move here for black, I think, is right here. But then you run into some tricky situations, because after the knight moves, let's say he just comes back here, you're going to have a pin on this piece. And so whatever you do, whatever you play, you'd have to, in order to defend this piece, you have to bring the knight back. You're going to pile up on it and take advantage of the pin. So he elects not to do this, but by moving his king to f8, it just gives me a pawn and a tempi on the rook. So the only way to save the piece is rook to d8. And now I pile up here, forcing the king to come back. And at this point I just trade, because this is an interesting decision by me. So I decide that based on how the game's gone so far, I think I'm a better end player than him. And I think that getting into an end game, since I'm more developed and the king's relatively safe, is better for me, because this rook hasn't even moved yet. And I think I'm going to be able to take advantage of his this isolated pawn island over here. So I elect to trade everything and go into an endgame. So I'm threatening to pick up this piece. Rook to c8 threatens to win my c2 pawn, and I'm not about giving away pawns. That's the #1 tip I'll give you in the endgames, is pawns are everything. If you don't think losing one pawn means you lose the game, you need to change your mindset, because pawns are the fabric of chess. Pawns hold everything together, and if you lose your pawns, you're going to lose more games than not. So I know a lot of lower rated players really focus in on pieces and maybe just checking the king, but I'm telling you, if you will focus on pawns and picking pawns off, that's how you are going to win. So if you analyze this position right here, black has a lot of weaknesses, and white has a couple weaknesses as well. If you want to pause the video and let me know what you think, go ahead. So a couple weaknesses that I see for black right now are this A7 pawn, B7 pawn, and this F7 pawn. And you can even make an argument for H7, but I really don't have a way to attack it. All these pawns are weak. And so white's game plan here should be to get the rook to somehow infiltrate, perhaps. If you look at our own weaknesses, this pawn is weak, but we have lots of pieces over here to defend these other pawns. You could say that A2 is quite weak, but our C pawn is being defended by our B pawn, and that takes away this open file from the rook. And the king is on the D file, which also prevents black from taking advantage of it. So infiltrating is going to be easier for white than black in this position. Sorry for that rant. Let's get back to the game. A6 is a good move, not just giving me this free pawn. And so I close off the center, mainly because I don't want to banish my knight to A3. I mean, what's he going to do over there? He can't jump back to the C file because it's covered by the rook. So not the best place. Ideally, I would like to have the rook on the D file already, and then I could have jumped here to D6, and that would have given me lots of options. So unfortunately, not the best position, but you work with what you have. A good developing move by black here, and you're going to see black kind of gives me the runaround. I don't play this very well, and yeah, let's get right into it. So I try and trade, but he checks me, and you're going to see that white takes advantage, or I'm sorry, black takes advantage of white's king. So I pressure him, he moves again, I pressure him again, which probably isn't the greatest decision, mainly because from this position right here, if there were no other pieces on the board, it would take this knight 4 moves to check the white king, because they're on the same diagonal and there's one square in between them. And this is just a classic chess position. If you know this position, it takes him 4 moves to, well, 3 moves, 1, 2, 3, and then on the 4th move he can get to this square. So 3 moves to attack, the 4th move to actually kill. So moving closer towards this knight allows him to check me, and I continue to do so until I blunder this B pawn with check. And so at this point I was extremely frustrated with myself. I was like, what am I doing chasing this knight around? So I just get away from him, because if I just keep allowing him to windmill me and continuously check me and I lose a couple more pawns, this game's over. So black is in a winning position right now, and it's interesting how I turn this around. So after a check and king moves, I threaten. This was an oversight. This king move right here was really bad, because it allows me to attack the knight with tempo, and there's no checks, and it allows me to win a pawn with tempo. And so a really bad move by black. As you can see, actually you can't see, I apologize about that, but the times in this game, he had 25 seconds and I had a minute left when this game finished, and it was a 5+0. So endgames are hard to win when you're low on time. You just got to stick to basic principles, gobble up these pawns. So already, if I can win this A pawn, I have a really big advantage, because I'm going to have a passed A pawn with equal material to defend and attack it. So this is a good move, adding another tempo on the knight, and then here I take advantage of the diagonal. Right, there's a square in between us, so I know the knight's going to have no more checks. This I also thought was a poor move by black, because it's basically helping me as I'm getting rid of this weakness of having two doubled pawns on the F file, and he can't just capture back, because then the rook takes these 2 pawns and it's just game over, right? So he basically, I don't know what he was doing. I think he just kind of panicked, but it allows me to fix my pawn structure and create a shield for my king. So he attacks the knight, and I easily defend the knight, and attacking his knight while defending my own, so he has to move. This was not a great move by me, attacking the rook, because he can just check me. This was a very poor move by black. As you can see, endgames are just full of blunders, and you don't even realize it, because after this, I just gobble up a pawn. You know, he should have tried to go after my a pawn. This is a nice defense here. This c pawn's really in his way, and you know, trying to double up on it instead of bringing his knight down here. If he would have tried to get his knight to this square, or even win the a pawn, he would have been able to try and pick off this c pawn, and he would have been in a much better position. So after this position, I win this pawn, and at this point the game's over. It's just execution here. I need to make sure I don't blunder any of my pawns, and that I pick off his a pawn and push to victory. So we'll kind of go quickly through the rest of these moves. There's no way to defend this pawn because the c pawn's covering the b4 square. So after he gives this up, he makes a terrible blunder. He thinks that it's defended, but it's not, because after check and king moves, you win the knight, and then this game's over. He tried to make me work for it, but by playing solid, pushing pawns, nothing to do here. Defends the pawn, push again, so that way he can't cap. If I move my rook up, he can either capture and I queen, or if he captures, I queen this way. So basic ending principles. And then yeah, from here, trading is wonderful. Even though it's a rook for a queen, I still have 2 extra queens on the board. So at this point, he just resigned, and that's the game. So a couple ending principles are: pawns are everything, and identify weaknesses, identify targets, and make a game plan. Especially when you're in a blitz or a bullet game, winning end games is all about pawns. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was a little bit longer, but I went in an in-depth analysis of what my thoughts were during this game, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. So I hope to catch you in the next one. Until then, have a good day, and we'll see you later.